This is one of over 500 assisted PNF stretching demonstrations that can be found as part of my 80 Days to Your Dream Body course, which is available to my channel members. If you'd like to see all of them, then consider becoming a member. But for right now, let's get our stretch on. And while we're resting, it's time to continue on with the assisted PNF stretching demonstration. Now we're going to continue where we left off, and we're going to transition into the inferior fibers of the middle trapezius and the inferior fibers of the rhomboids major. That is going to be the main emphasis of this particular stretch, and we're pretty much going to be in a very similar position that we were previously. The only difference is, depending on your hand positioning, we may be switching our orientation of our body. But with regard to the patient, we wanted to go into coronal abduction, abduction away from the midline of 120 degrees. So we're going to take the patient's arm, we're going to go into coronal abduction of 120, and then we have a couple of different options. Because when we're working above 90 degrees, it's going to be a little bit more awkward if you're facing the head of the patient. I would prefer to face the feet of the patient. You can face whichever way makes you more comfortable, but this way it's just a little bit more ergonomic for the therapist. What we would do is we would place one hand to stabilize, and then we could go with an underhand supinated grip at the distal humerus, right at the crook of the elbow, at the proximal radius and ulna. And then to initiate the PNF, first we would get them into a nice deep stretch, and then we would instruct the patient to inhale and either go into scapular retraction, go into, you can squeeze your shoulder blades together, whatever cue gets the job done. This would be one hand position. My preferred positioning when I'm working on the scapular retractors, and particularly those inferior fibers, is I like to go elbow to elbow. And for this one right over here, I would do the same positioning. So I would get my greater trochanter of my femur up against the patient's back. And then at that 120-degree angle, I would lock my elbow onto the patient's elbow, lock the hand onto the bicep, and then stabilize at the proximal radius and ulna. And then from here, I would just lean out on that angle, and I would instruct the patient to inhale, and I want you to retract the scapula. I want you to squeeze your shoulder blades together, whatever cue gets the job done. And they would inhale, go into scapular retraction. And as they exhale and relax, I'm going to lean away and take them deeper into scapular protraction on that 120-degree angle. When we are focusing on the scapular retractors at 120 degrees of coronal abduction, we're still going to be focusing on the same muscles, but the emphasis is now going to shift a little bit more. In this position, we're now going to be emphasizing the inferior fibers of the middle trapezius and the inferior fibers of the rhomboids major. We're still going to be getting a decent amount of the superior fibers of the rhomboids major, and we're still getting a little bit of the rhomboids minor in this particular position, but that's where the main emphasis is, on those inferior fibers of the middle trapezius and the inferior fibers of the rhomboids major. Some other muscles that we will be getting a decent amount of stretch. Now that we're going more and more into coronal abduction, because the latissimus dorsi is an adductor, we're going to start getting more into the latissimus dorsi as we go more into coronal abduction. And with the levator scapulae, we are going to be losing it a little bit, but some other muscles that will be involved in this particular variation, they're not going to be directly targeted, but rather they're going to be indirectly targeted via the fascial connections, and that is going to be the infraspinatus, the teres major, and the teres minor. During the next rest period, now that we've done the scapular elevators and retractors, we're going to start working into these scapular depressors, or the depressors. But for right now, our rest period is up. Time for set number 7. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.